Our speaker today is Reverend Bob Tucker, and Reverend Bob asked me if I would read a couple of stories about fathers in honor of Father's Day. So, so he sent me these two stories about fathers in different countries. The first one is from South Africa. I never told my children what my job was. I never wanted them to feel ashamed of me. When my youngest daughter asked me what I did, I used to tell her hesitantly that I was a laborer. Before I went back home every day, I used to take a bath in the public toilets so they would not get any hint of the work I was doing. I wanted to send my daughters to school to educate them. I wanted them to stand in front of people with dignity. I never wanted anyone to look down upon them like the way everyone did to me. People always humiliated me. I invested every penny of my earnings for my daughter's education. I never bought a new shirt. Instead, I used the money for buying books for them. Respect is all I wanted them to earn for me. I was a cleaner. The day before the last date of my daughter's college admission, I could not manage to get her admission fees. I could not work that day. I was sitting beside the rubbish, trying hard to hide my tears. All my coworkers were looking at me, but no one came to speak to me. I had failed and felt heartbroken. I had no idea how to face my daughter, who would ask me about the admission fees once I got back home. I was born poor. I believed nothing good could happen to a poor person. After work, all the cleaners came to me, sat beside me, and asked me if I considered them as brothers. Before I could answer, they each handed me their one day's income. When I tried to refuse everyone, they confronted me by saying, "We will starve today if needed, but our daughter has to go to college." I couldn't reply to them. That day, I did not take a shower. I went back to my house like a cleaner. My oldest daughter is going to finish her university very soon. 3 of them do not let me go to work anymore. My oldest girl has a part-time job, and the other 3 of them do tuition. Often, my oldest daughter takes me to my working place. She feeds all my coworkers along with me. They laugh and ask her why she feeds them so often. My daughter told them, "All of you starved for me that day so I can become what I am today. Pray for me that I can feed you all every day." Nowadays, I don't feel like I am a poor man. Whoever has such children, how can he be poor? And a second story from Thailand. Here's a story of a man from Thailand who did farming for his family's living. The man's wife died soon after the birth of their child. The man alone raised his son and used his earnings for his child's education and his good upbringing. By the time his son was about to attend college, the man sold all his possessions so that his son could attend college and become a graduate. The child graduated and completed his education from Ratchapur University in Chiang Rai, northern Thailand, because of his father's sacrifice and hard work. Living in a village where kids do not even complete their schooling, this achievement of the farmer's child was astounding. the son shared a picture of himself and his father while he's wearing his graduation cap and gown. He wrote, "A poor farmer supported his child, his son, to complete his graduation. My father is my biggest pride. How many thanks does this great father deserve?" Reverend Bob Tucker is retired after serving the First Congregational Church in Houston for nearly 30 years. He and his wife Maggie visit us usually once a month when Bob inspires us with his wisdom and experiences. Bob was the senior minister of the First Congregational Church of Houston. He was also the interim minister at First Unitarian in Houston. He has served churches in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Kansas. He and Maggie taught for several years in Turkey, and he is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Foundation for Contemporary Theology. We want to welcome Reverend Bob today, and the topic of his talk today is Life's Boot Camp. I'll ask you to remember that you can share, go to the top of your screen and go to the speaker view so that you can see predominantly Reverend Bob and his speech.
Bob, we can't hear you.
Okay, there are 3 mute places. You can hear me now. Okay, good. What I was saying is that I wanted to thank Kathleen for reading those 2 stories. I find them very tender. And of course, they lead into the day itself, which is Father's Day. I've always considered Father's Day something of a caboose on a train, with Mother's Day as the powerful engine. And in recently reading the history of Father's Day, I discovered that to be true. Mother's Day caught on right away after being proposed. And in 1909, 45 states observed the day. And then it was in 1914 that President Woodrow Wilson approved the resolution that made the second Sunday in May a holiday in honor of, quote, as he put it, that tender, gentle army, the mothers of America, unquote. Father's Day, although proposed about the same time, was not made it into a holiday until 58 years later in 1972, when in the middle of a tight election campaign, Richard Nixon signed a proclamation making Father's Day a federal holiday. And during those 58 years, who was pushing for an official Father's Day? Well, it wasn't the men, it was a series of women. When asked about the parent who takes care of us the most and who nurtures us, almost everyone thinks of mother. George Floyd, as the knee was pressed on his neck, said, "Mama, I love you." And sport figures, when they're signing their first multi-million-dollar contracts, often say, the first thing is a new house for mom. But Father's Day is a reminder of the contributions of the father in one's development. As worthwhile as it is to think about fathers and mothers, today I want to skip over those critical individuals in our lives and talk about what mothers and fathers have in common, the family. In pre-pandemic days, while traveling around, I would often see the signs in front of churches of coming sermons. and I saw titles such as The Christian Family, How to Have a Godly Family, a Model Biblical Family. I was always bothered by the working assumption I knew was behind such sermon titles. So much of the language and desires for family hover around an idealized picture that we carry around with us. Listen to what one religious conservative publication said about family. One of the greatest blessings we can receive in this life is the love of a family, and the bonds that exist between its members are sacred. It's no accident that the Bible is filled with passages that explain our relationship to God by comparing it to our relationship with our Father. But it's not just religion that places before us an idealized family. The magazine Psychology Today, in an article, states the reality of a gold standard for families. And this is a quote: "An ideal family is the one in which every member has a very good understanding with each other. They live without any disputes, spend time with each other, talk to each other, and every day and always help each other. And they learn to be cheerful, happy, despite the day-to-day problems." Well, was that descriptive of your family, past or present, or of any family you know of? And then I think as I ride along, I wonder what Bible family preachers have in mind for their sermons. Perhaps it's Adam and Eve family with Cain killing brother Abel. Or perhaps it's the Abraham and Sarah family abandoning mother Hagar and their child Ishmael. Or perhaps it's Abraham coming very close to cutting the throat of his own son in some perverted sense of divine loyalty. Or perhaps it's Lot's family, with the eldest daughter-in-law getting her father-in-law drunk and having sex without his knowledge, seduction by a child of an adult. And then the next night, the younger sister doing the same thing. And why? Because Lot's sons, their husbands, had been killed, and this was a way to carry on the family. Or perhaps the biblical family that people refer to is that of Jacob and Rebekah, when their sons are selling their youngest brother into slavery, Joseph. Or perhaps we have the family of King David, adultery with Bathsheba, and one, perhaps even two rapes, and then an attempted fratricide. Well, up to this point, I've been only mentioning families in the Old Testament. And some of the posted sermons promise a New Testament Christian family. Alas, there's not much really to talk about in the New Testament. Actually, the family is not a primary concern of the writers of the New Testament. We do have the story of Jesus, of parents leaving him in Jerusalem alone while he was 12 years old. Or it may have been the case that Jesus found a way to escape from his parents. Then there was the time when Jesus was told by his disciples that his mother and brothers and sisters were on the edge of the crowd waiting to see him. And if you can believe this, Jesus turned and faced the crowd and said, "And who are my mother and brothers and sisters? Those who do the will of the Heavenly Father." And imagine yourself as part of that family coming to see your child, your brothers, and how you would feel if you were treated that way. With a smart alecky son, brother like that, it would be a pleasure to kick his rear end all the way back to Nazareth. Then there is, of course, the fact that Jesus never established a family of his own, which makes a sermon about Jesus and family life somewhat difficult. Actually, the family is not a primary concern of the New Testament. Well, not really of the Old Testament either, other than the terrible stories that we have. Perhaps the overall biblical teaching about family is that it's a secondary concern. And perhaps what the Bible really tells us is, in the few glimpses we have, that normal family life is untidy and at times dangerous. Perhaps the Bible tells us that children are always sacrificed on the altar of their parents' dreams, even if not almost literally with Abraham and Isaac. By imposing our ideal of family congeniality, harmony, and loving on Bible characters, we deny what the stories plainly state, that such idealization can increase feelings of deficiency and feelings of failure. Is there a parent who has not felt deficiency and failure at times? And so perhaps what the Bible teaches really is that the divine spirit works not in the world of some ideal, but in and through the mishmash of our everyday life. Well, obviously, if you have listened to this talk and if you know me, I believe that assuming collegiality and harmony as the norm for the family is an assumption that needs to be trashed. And so now let me speak positively. Have come to believe that the family exists, willingly or not, as a training ground. I call it life's boot camp. The family is the place where we are forced to live with others, where we learn how to coexist with others who are very different from ourselves. The family teaches us tolerance and acceptance of humans who are as vain and stubborn, exasperating and irrational, dogmatic and irritating as we ourselves are. The family is a boot camp for the battles and the people one faces throughout life. In the family, we learn not just the easy love of those we choose to be with, those with similar interests and temperaments, but also the non-affectionate love, the tough love of persisting in and willing the best for those who are unlike ourselves and who at times have us grinding our teeth in frustration and anger. To glare in anger and with malice at one's siblings, and to have a parent say, you don't have to like each other, but you have to love each other, is a critical part of life's boot camp training. Not to deny the irritation and anger, but to acknowledge how we navigate those violent feelings within the common bond of human love. Most of us are raised in multiple children families and often find little in common with siblings other than parentage. And later, when parents ourselves, we stand in amazement as we find our own offspring from the same genetic sources, often growing in the same environment, uniquely different and distinct. A reasonable conclusion to draw is that the value of family life is not that it is a haven of harmony, but a crucible of conflicting temperaments. It is not the blending and harmonizing of varying temperaments, but the navigating through and negotiating of differences that make family life a boot camp. Parents can feel positive about their role in providing space where a child can say, "I hate you," and doesn't act on it by killing the other or killing the parent, where arms are available even in such rage. Home, wrote Robert Frost in his poem, The Death of the Hired Man, is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Yes. Home is not where one suppresses feelings of an enforced harmony, but the place where people grimace and disagree and fight and tolerate, and even at times love each other. Home is where loving arms embrace even kicking and screaming. The family is life's boot camp. Parents' hearts go pitter-patter when their children at the age of 27 or thereabouts actually begin to like and appreciate each other. To see one's children be involved in a normal conversation is a heart-stopping thrill. I found it so. That's dessert, but it comes only after the bread and butter, meat and potatoes, or whatever the equivalent is in this diet-conscious age, of family life sustaining and molding children through the preceding years. The family, I believe, is life's boot camp. What I hope you can take with you today is a different view of the family. If we can eliminate the ideal picture of people always living in harmony, or even always liking each other, or in the words of psychology today, a place where everyone lives life without any disputes, spends time with each other, talks to each other every day, and always helps each other, and is always cheerful despite the day-to-day problems. If we can push aside that idea, I think, and look at the family realistically, we have taken a giant step to understanding the family in such a way that it can be truly appreciated. What I hope you can take with you today is an appreciation of the tensions and travails of your own childhood, or the family you created and the children you raised, or the family you are currently shaping. Instead of viewing some ideal of family life, recognize your family for what it was and is, life's boot camp, and shed any thoughts of failure in the ongoing crunch of personalities. Well, I'm going to stop here and let me know what your thoughts are about family life, and also the idea that the family is not the haven of collegiality, but rather a boot camp for life. And then after a period of back and forth response, then I want to finish with a couple of stories from my own experience as a minister on the tensions that I see within families. Okay. So let's start the question or comment period now.
Ellie, go ahead. Oh, Kathleen, I'll defer to you to call on people. I'll be quiet.
Okay.
Do you have me? I just wanted to bring up another aspect of family. We have a group of Facebook friends in New Hampshire and Vermont that we've never met, but we get together and chit chat and have gotten to know each other over the computer and our phones. And there's one man who's an editor, he's in his 30s, he's an editor of a weekly Vermont paper, and he recently got a better job. So in a parting editorial, he let his readership know that he was, and we all knew this, he was trans, Yet he always talked about his kiddo who he had given birth to. So he was the mother of his child and is now the father of his child. And at first, he and his kiddo celebrated Mother's Day. Then they decided to celebrate Father's Day. Then they decided to celebrate both days. And this year, they picked June 1st, which is in between Mother's Day and Father's Day, and the start of Pride Month, and they're calling it Parents' Day. And his kiddo and he are now celebrating, his kiddo is celebrating his parent on June 1st, which they have dubbed Parents' Day. And I thought that was a wonderful concept, and Mark did too.
Stephen? Stephen? Unmute.
Okay. When Tucker was describing biblical families, something I had been aware of for some time, which is when you hear people say families should be biblical, my response to that is be careful what you wish for, because what Tucker was talking about, to me, it almost sounded like the plot to a soap opera. And, it wasn't, what most people consider the ideal for a family at all. The other thing, I think sometimes families run into, I guess, what could be called, for lack of better expression, constitutional issues. Like, I know my nuclear family seems to have the problem of having a way of doing things that maybe is better suited for 19th century Latvia than for 21st century Texas. And I think sometimes those kind of future shock issues, which I know affects my family, can be a big problem.
Thank you, Stephen. Margaret?
I have two comments. I'm a family therapist by education and experience. First, I hope that quote from Psychology Today is real old. I really hope that. The other thing is that something we often don't think about is that no two people have the same family, because we are not in our own family. We have a different set of siblings and parents, or at least than anyone else in the family. So just something to think about.
Thank you, Margaret. Anyone else? Shirley?
As one of 9 children, I consider myself an expert on family dynamics. And I always thought how incredibly close my family is until my mother passed away. And then to be in a room with these 8 other people, it's like, I don't even know you. I mean, it's just, and with all due respect to fathers on Father's Day, there is something about mother love that all of my siblings had. And I think that's what we had in common more than each other.
Thank you, Shirley. Martha? Unmute, Martha.
I want to thank you, Bob, for a great sermon. I was walking around this morning feeling kind of bereft because I saw these wonderful pictures of both of my brother's families on Facebook, where everybody is all happy and they're all together. And I don't have that in my life. And so I was feeling kind of, maybe sad or poignant because there's all of you people at UU are my family, and that's a fact. But listening to your story or your explanation of a family, Bob, made me laugh because it's really true. It's like, how do we idealize this group of people who really have nothing in common except they're just born to the same parents? And it cheered me up to hear your description and made me get a different perspective on how I was feeling. So anyway, thank you very much. Wonderful sermon.
Marty?
Yeah, I want to second what Martha said, and also Denise, that Bob nailed it. In my family, I was so dependent on my family and my brothers, and I thought they were the ideal. And then I went through a stage where my only friends were my friends, or my family was my friends, and my family was not in the picture at all. And now it's back to we all appreciate each other, but we certainly had times when people were rude and brutal in the growing up part. And as Bob pointed out, it was boot camp. But there was this basic love there, which is how we got through it all.
Who else? Mitch?
Well, I come from a large, medium-sized family, but it's an old school Southern family. And so we're really close, still really close. And I remember it was a poet, I forget which one, who said, family is those people that when they show up at the door, you have to let them in. And so we had our differences. My oldest brother is Republican, so I won't go any further into that. But we still, we get together all the time. And the thing is, if, like when he had a stroke, or when my other brother had to have knee surgery, we were all there for each other. And that's the thing. So, we don't even pretend to be perfect, which we don't expect each other to be perfect. So that's a kind of a basis for our family too. So I'm joyful for them.
Thank you, Mitch. Anyone else? We do have time after we finish too, for any additional comments.
Well, I also want, since time is getting close to the end, I do want to just add two little stories of my own from my ministry. The time that I found where I became most aware of the distance in families was at the death of a parent, and usually the final parent. And when I would gather together with the families, with the children and spouses and often their children in my office before the memorial service, it would be somewhat, in times it would be somewhat frosty. They just hadn't spoken with each other for a long time. And so in order to sort of break the future ice, I would say, well, now that your parent has died, or both of them are gone, and that place where the cousins, that is your children, got together, who's going to be responsible now for providing the space and providing the time for the children to get together? I could see at least there was a glimmer of recognition in the minds of the people. I didn't know that it ever went beyond that because I lost touch with them. But at least it was my attempt to inject a little more conversation in the family. Then there's one other time I want to talk about that happened, where I did affect a change. Once or twice a week, I would get down to the Houston Medical Center to visit people in the hospital. And while there, I would go to the chaplain's office. That was on the first floor. It was a large room. Chaplains were treated well. There were easy chairs. There were 3 telephones. I'm thinking now of the time before cell phones. There was always free coffee and free soft drinks. But most important, there were files. And in those files, divided by different religious groups, were all the patients in the hospital that had said they were of a particular religious orientation. Of course, the Southern Baptists, the Roman Catholics had large files, whereas the Congregationalist United Church of Christ and Unitarians had narrow files. It wasn't that they culled those people out, it's just that those groups were somewhat small here in this part of the country. I remember one time I went up to visit, but I would visit people from outside of the city of Houston, sometimes in the rest of the country, even a couple of international visitors or patients, and just to let them know I was around and see if there's anything I could do to be of help. One time I visited this man from Ohio, and the second sentence he spoke was, "I'm going to die." Now, that startled me. That's not how people generally start their conversations. But I did find out that he was making a statement of fact. He wasn't complaining. And I said, "Well, how do you know that? And the doctor tell you?" He said, "No, but the doctor's only interested now in my pain, not in my healing. And the nurses no longer are as attentive to me as they once were." And in talking with him further, what I found out that one of the parts of his life that was really unresolved and bothered him a lot was the fact that he had a brother with whom he had not spoken for over 40 years. Now that's a long time to not be speaking to a family member. And I could tell it really bothered him. And I did something at that point that I don't think I've ever done before, and I still don't understand what was driving me at that point. But I found out the brother's name and where he lived, and then I said to the patient, I said, "Well, I need to leave for a little. I'll be back." And I left my notebook there on the table so that he would be assured that I would be back. And I went down to the basement, took the elevator down to the first floor, and went to the chaplain's office and started to check around on information. And this was before computers. I got to the city, I called the brother, I told him who I was, that his brother was dying, and he seemed to want to talk. And so I said to the brother, I said, "Well, I'm going to call you. I'm going back up to the room. I'm going to call you. And if you want to talk, you'll answer the phone, and I will just put the receiver by your brother's ear." And I said, "If I do, you need to start speaking, because your brother is going to be so shocked that he won't know what to say." And that's what I did. And they started to very hesitantly speak with each other. And then, of course, I left. I came 2 days later and visit and found out that he had spoken 2 more times with his brother. And then 2 days after that, I was down in the hospitals again, and I found a different patient in that room. And I would think about that, 40 years of not talking with a sibling. How much of that person's life had been lost because of the lack of that relationship? It's one of the few times in my life that I can, that I think I did something really good. And there aren't that many of them, but that was one of them. Anyway, how we, as Margaret said, there's all families seem to be different. And you just in the response that you were giving to me and some of your different families shows that. But nevertheless, it's something to treasure, the relationships we have with those who are part of our family. And if anyone still has a little tension there, I would suggest you call and try and reconnect. And even if you are in good relationship, give a call and reconnect. The family, I still believe, is the place where we learn how to live and how to live with people who are different from ourselves. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Reverend Bob. I know we'll have more conversation on this as we close.